part 4 of a 6-part masterclass series on preserving the harvest from your garden. If you're like most gardeners, you think about preservation when your counters are overflowing with tomatoes and zucchini. But successful food gardeners think differently. They see preservation as the foundation of growing vegetables, not an afterthought. Planning your preservation goals before planting your first seed helps you choose the right varieties for your favorite preservation methods, grow appropriate quantities so you're not overwhelmed or disappointed, space out your harvests for manageable processing sessions, and identify crops you can store without processing at all. Throughout this series, you'll learn how this foundation-first approach transforms both your garden and your pantry. We're excited to share this information with you and help you take another step toward true self-sufficiency and food security for your family. Let's get started.
So, secret number 2. In just 6 weeks, your pantry could be stocked year-round with fresh, healthy food options. Think about this for a minute. In just 6 weeks, you could have a pantry stocked so that you could have meals in minutes. And no, I don't mean canning. We're not going to talk about canning here. We're not going to talk about pickling nonstop for 6 weeks. Here is a quick story for you. So I used to do catering gigs and pop-up restaurant gigs in Brooklyn, and I got to work with some amazing chefs in New York City. And once we were working on a menu for a fundraiser at the farm, and each chef was taking one of our vegetables and creating a dish around it. And I decided I wanted to create a recipe to showcase our cabbage. And this is a big event. There's lots of dishes that were going to be on the plate. I was working with these amazing chefs, and my food had to be amazing next to these chefs. So I wanted to test some new concoctions before I started creating the final recipe for the actual event. So I wanted to work with our cabbage. Now, I know this might not sound exciting to everybody, but what I wanted to do was to create a bunch of different sauerkrauts. And so I wanted to test the recipes first. So I went to the grocery store. I didn't take the food from the farm yet because that's going to be for the fundraiser. So I went to the store and I bought a bunch of cabbage, and a bunch of other vegetables and herbs, and I made 12 quarts of various sauerkraut recipes. I wanted to try different options and see how the recipes would taste when they were paired with other food that the chefs were preparing. Now, somebody might be thinking sauerkraut doesn't sound that fancy or that interesting at all. But part of the mission of the fundraiser was to raise awareness about how fermented foods improve your gut health. And some of the health stats are really staggering around the health of your gut. So 40% of diseases are linked to bacterial imbalances in the gut. It's incredible, right? So things like depression, arthritis, IBS, cancer, these are all things that are related to imbalances in our gut. And fermented foods like sauerkraut are very interesting to people who are interested in peak health, who see their food as medicine. Is your food medicine? Do you see it that way? And now more than ever, boosting your immunity is so important in a world that's gone a little bit crazy, right? Okay, so I have to say, these were not your typical sauerkrauts that I wanted to make. I wanted to make delicious sauerkrauts that were unusual. So among one of them that was my favorite was a rosemary, plum, lemongrass sauerkraut, because that's what we had available on the farm. Those were the ingredients. So I wanted to make that as the recipe. And so the fermentation process can take anywhere between 2 to 6 weeks for those of you who are unfamiliar with the process. So after about 14 days, I knew that I had some winners among the 12 recipes that I had made. But here's the thing. Remember, I said I made these sauerkrauts from the grocery store. I didn't make them from the farm. These were just test runs. So I had to now remake all of this from cabbage that was growing on the farm. So I had at home 12 extra quarts of sauerkraut all to myself. And here's what I learned about myself. I love putting a dollop of sauerkraut on everything. And I basically went through all that sauerkraut in 13 weeks, a little less than a quart per week. So this is me putting a dollop of sauerkraut on my veggie burgers And what I found was that about 25% of the food on my plate each meal is typically something fermented. And here I had created 13 weeks worth in just 2 hours on a Sunday. So here's sauerkraut on my breakfast plate with my refried beans, my collard greens, and my avocado. So let me break this down what this means. This means that you could create I could create all my own sauerkraut for the year in less than 8 hours. That's incredible to think about, right? How easy is that? 25% of the food on my plate, vegetables, fermented vegetables, great for my health, boosting my immunity against diseases, taken care of in just 8 hours of prep time each year. Now, you've probably spent that much time cooking in a single week, right? It's mind-boggling. So have you ever run the math on the staples that you eat? It's really powerful to do this exercise. So how many jars of pasta sauce would you need for the year? How many zucchini burgers do you need frozen for the year? How long would it take for you to stow all that away for whenever you need it? Now, I'm not sure what your staples are, but it turns out if I create large batches, I could stock my pantry with most of my staples if I spent 8 hours on Sundays for 6 weeks in a row. That's 8 hours for 6 weeks. 8 hours is a long time, but it's only 6 weeks. I find it much more enjoyable to spend about 2 hours every Sunday planning my meals for the week and knocking out some of those preservation goals on my plan. So I don't do 8 hours each week. I do more like 2 hours and knock out my meal planning for the week and my food preservation for the year. Because here's the deal. Have you ever wondered how restaurants can feed hundreds of people in just a half an hour, and why it takes us that same half hour to just feed ourselves or our family one single meal? Restaurants don't have endless options. They have staples that are stocked and prepped and ready to go. And they have 12 types of chefs, some that clean the potatoes, some that chop the potatoes, some that make the soup, some that plate the dishes. You're trying to do all those things at once every time you cook, and it's not very efficient. You know, they even have sous chefs and station chefs that batch all this preparation work. So I want you to think about your staples for a moment. If you're new to preserving food, start with just 3 staples. What are 3 things that would be awesome to have fresh year-round? How much do you eat each week of that staple? If you don't know, start a food journal and notice what you eat regularly and how much of it you eat. We really are creatures of habit. Even though we like diversity and we like to try new things, we really are creatures of habit when it comes to food. You're going to start to see patterns. Quantify how much you need to make and to enjoy this year-round. And if you want to link this to your garden, the next step is to quantify how many plants you're going to need to grow to get the amount of vegetables that you need. So I like to make rate-based goals to make sure I'm preserving enough of my staples to help me make it through the off-season. Remember, every time you prep a meal throughout the week, it's time-consuming. So in this case of a rate-based goal, I'm looking at, I want 1 tablespoon of dried green powder for each day of the winter. And so I start looking at, okay, 1 bunch, 10 leaves is about 1 to 2 tablespoons dried. I'm assuming 150 days in my winter. So I need 75 to 150 bunches. And if my growing season is 25 weeks long, if I'm drying 5 bunches per week, then I have my greens for the winter. So think rate-based goals. Because like I said, every time you prep a meal throughout the week, it's time consuming. You're pulling everything out, you're washing it, you're cleaning everything, and then when you're done, you're putting everything back. So batching and automating saves you tons of time year round. Think like a restaurant owner. Think about creating 80 meals all at once. Or 90 meals all at once. How much time are you going to free up when you have 90 meals planned at a time? 90 meals is like 3 months of food, right? Here's the deal. If you're in a hurry to get food on the table, you might be tempted to grab something more convenient, which, let's face it, oftentimes means less healthy or less fresh. And I get it. After a busy day, you're tired. I know I have wished for the magic dinner fairy to show up and put fresh food on my table. Wouldn't it be nice to have your kitchen stocked so that meals take just a couple minutes to throw together? Here's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about biggie sizing your meal plans, but keep it simple. Start with those 3 staples and add more each year. And if you're wondering what to do if you have multiple mouths to feed, you might be thinking, 2 hours a week doesn't sound reasonable to preserve all the food for all my loved ones. Here's what I would tell you. Hungry mouths, they come with 2 hands each, right? So as long as kids are old enough to wash and cut vegetables, they can help you prepare big batches. And one of the principles of my Harvest into Meal system is that many hands make light work. It's fun for the whole family. So you make this a party and everybody enjoys it. So that's what's possible here. So can you see how in just 6 weeks, your pantry could be stocked year-round with fresh, healthy meals? Do you see how this can work for you as well? And like I said, start with your staples, keep it simple, and gradually build up.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And for more simple and practical gardening tips, subscribe to Grow Your Own Vegetables. For more tips and updates, visit gyov.org and join our growing community.